Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed Nader, and tonight we're going to focus on the Egyptian bilateral relations with the continent of Africa, more specifically under the tenure of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and how they have evolved over the past decade or more, in the past 10 or 12 years. And even on Sunday we'll be addressing the main top stories for today. One of them is the visit of the Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud and the meeting that took place between him and His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And I'm honored to be having with me in the studio for tonight Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. First of all, we'll be starting with one of the main top stories for today, and they come through the presidential activities of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who had received the Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud in Cairo. In a joint news conference following the talks, President al-Sisi said that the meeting focused on the bilateral ties and the issues of mutual concern. He said that the means of boosting economic and trade ties topped the agenda of the talks. During the meeting, President al-Sisi said that Egypt plans to dispatch a medical convoy to Somalia with the doctors in multiple specialties. We'll be having more details in the upcoming report. Stay tuned.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud in Cairo on Sunday. In a news conference following their talks, al-Sisi said the meeting focused on bilateral ties and issues of mutual concern. He said means of boosting economic and trade ties topped the agenda of the talks. He also said that during the meeting, al-Sisi said Egypt plans to dispatch a medical convoy to Somalia with doctors in multiple specialties. During the talks, regional developments in the Red Sea and Horn of Africa were also high on the agenda of the talks. al-Sisi reiterated Cairo's historical stance in support of the unity of Somalia's land. He stressed rejection to any measures that threaten the stability and security of Somalia and the Horn of Africa region. He also said the talks stressed the importance of Egypt's participation in the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM. He also stressed Cairo's support for the Somali side in training fields within the activities of the Egyptian Agency of Development in Africa. He said the security of the Red Sea and Horn of Africa region is the direct and exclusive responsibility of neighboring coastal states. He said Egypt will continue with efforts to preserve the security and stability of Somalia, the Red Sea and the Horn of Africa. For his part, the Somali president said Mogadishu will always be grateful for Egypt's efforts to preserve the security and stability of Somalia. He said the talks reflected the depth and strength of ties between the two countries. He said the meeting reflected genuine by the two sides to achieve peace and security in the Horn of Africa. The Somali president said the Israeli recognition of the separatist Somaliland region is against international law.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and we will be focusing on this visit of the Somali President to Cairo and the meeting that took place between the Somali President and His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and of course the ensuing press conference. Ambassador Medhat Meligy, one of the main topics that were tackled today during the meeting of His Excellency President al-Sisi and the Somali counterpart Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud was the economic and the trade ties. How do you see the importance of boosting those ties between Egypt and Somalia nowadays?
Well, first of all, good evening, first of all. And allow me to say that Egypt have always supported Somalia and the integrity of Somalia and the independence of this country that has been torn by civil war for a certain period of time and now is facing separation from Somaliland and all these troubles that are in the region. So beside the support, the political support that Egypt has always been providing to Somalia, now is the time to move to a higher level, which is a pillar on such an important country,
Yes.
which is the economic side of the relationship. And I believe that Egypt, with all its might, is capable, even more than capable, to help Somalia to boost its economy, to develop the country, because this is the only thing that the people will see and will actually sustain the integrity and the unity of the country. We cannot blame people when they see that the economic situation is not going well, that they seek other ways that might put the integrity of the country in risk.
Yes.
And that's why the step pronounced by His Excellency President Sisi when he mentioned the economic development of Somalia. Not just that, actually, I think he also spoke about the capacity building, which is something Egypt can help a lot with it, whether we are talking about the administrative or even we are talking about regular trade and economic relations. Both you need capacity building in both fields so that the country can develop. And I believe that beside the political thing, the economic is a very important step on the way, not of course to mention the collective security issue. That is not just a problem with Somalia, actually it's an African problem, and that's one of the pillars of the Egyptian regime. When we tackle the problems of Africa, we are talking always about the collective security that has to be done. As we all know, in Somalia that we have some radical movements that are trying to use the economic problems to even strengthen more the division of the country.
Yes.
And this is the main problem that Somalia is seeking. And that's why the visit of the President today is very important, so that he can, with His Excellency Abdel Fattah Sisi, discuss how can we help Somalia to remain united and to remain integral and to remain part of global African movement. All this without permitting the separatist group of Somaliland to use this. And not just that, there is a very important point that there are other countries and other influential powers that are fostering on the division of Somaliland for their own interest. I don't want to name names,
yes,
but of course we all know that, for instance, Israel have recognized Somaliland, and this is not, of course, a good step in the right direction towards the integrity of Somalia. On the contrary, this helps more to divide the country, which is one of the aims of Israel, as we have always seen, is to divide the whole region of Africa and in Middle East in order to conquer. When the countries are divided, of course, this helps Israel to flourish even more. And this is something also we are feeling really sorry about, and that's why we are trying to help as much as we can in order to prevent this from happening.
Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned that there are a number of problems that are facing Africa nowadays. One of them is healthcare, and one of the promises being given by President Abdel Fattah Sisi to his counterpart from Somalia is to be dispatching medical convoys from Egypt in different fields for the benefit of the Somali people. As you have served in Africa several times, how important is this step?
I cannot describe how important it is. I mean, I have to say that Egypt have dispatched several convoys, I mean numerous number of convoys towards all of Africa. And I have to say that these have been always welcome. I mean, we are talking about some diseases that none of the doctors in some countries are even capable of treating or dealing with, because they don't know how to treat it. And then you get an expert from Egypt coming to do a certain number of operations or a certain number of medical procedure. It does not just help the patients, but also it helps the medical staff who actually use this opportunity to learn from their Egyptian counterparts. So I think it's a very important thing, because those people cannot really face many diseases without the help of Egypt on one hand, and the wealthy one of them have to travel either to Egypt or to any other country to seek medical attention, but many of them just seek to find help, because it's a helpless case, and many of them even lose their life in the quest for fighting disease. And also I have to mention here that beside, of course, the state that is doing a great effort in dispatching those convoys. And of course, we are talking about Somalia, and I understand the importance of Somalia. But I mean, as a commentator and as an analyst, I have to say that Egypt have dispatched many medical convoys, and not just to Somalia, to many other African countries. I have also to give the credit to also the Egyptian church, that also dispatch medical convoys to help African countries, and they don't have to be a country of a Christian majority. I mean, I have to be frank on this. They just do it for the good doing that the church has always been doing. And I participated in some of these convoys. I've seen them firsthand, and I can tell you that the impact of those convoys are tremendous, not just in the medical field, but on the overall relations, bilateral relations between the two countries, because this is an effort that has been done for no profit at all. On the contrary, we are paying much for that, between the medical teams, between the aeroplanes, between the medical equipments that needs to be dispatched as well. So many things actually that the location that is dispatching this is paying for. So it's purely good and purely in the right direction to help the African continent. And in this case, of course, that we are talking about today, Somalia, and then believe that they are in dire strait for such a convoy.
Yes, and during the talks between the two leaders for today, we have seen one of the main topics being tackled was the latest developments in the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea. How do you see the developments and the proposed solutions for them?
Well, the Horn of Africa is becoming more and more a very dangerous problem for the continent, not just for the countries that are facing the problem.
Yes.
And Egypt, as the leading country in this effort, has to secure the maritime routes for the safety of the international navigation. We know the high percentage, the high volume of boats that go through the Red Sea and then the Suez Canal in order to reach the European markets and back to Asian and African markets. So I think it's a very important element to secure this. Of course, we have some countries who are destabilizing the region for their own benefit, and some landlocked countries who are trying to find its way, although there is a friendly way to use this. But of course, when you are talking about having a presence, a military presence, or even a constant presence in unrecognized land, separatist land, which is Somaliland, and by here I mean Ethiopia, who wants and actually said that there is ongoing talks with Somaliland officials in order to give them a parcel of land on the Red Sea so that they could have, and they believe that this is their own right. Of course, it's not their own right. They're fostering a division of a neighboring country, which is Somalia. They're destabilizing the area of Horn of Africa, not to mention, of course, their unilateral decision on the River Nile, which is totally against the international law. So actually we see many countries who are going against the international law
Yes.
and just to profit and to establish facts on the ground that later on we will suffer from trying to diffuse because of what will happen. And this is the serious point, and that's why I believe that Egypt, when it's trying to help Somalia to remain united and to preserve its integrity, this is not just done for Somalia, it's done for the whole Horn of
Yes,
Africa
this is
region.
a very crucial point, because we have seen today President Sisi reiterating Cairo's stance and support for the unity of Somalia. What does this say about the historical unity of a neighboring country from the point of view of Egypt against what you have mentioned, Mr. Ambassador, the efforts of some other countries to be dividing countries in Africa?
Well, actually, Egypt has always respected the ruling of the international law.
Yes.
Even if it benefits from disrespecting the international law, we have not. I mean, throughout history, you'll always find a country that is abiding by international law. And that's why we have only one word when we talk, which is the international law, whether we are talking about the Horn of Africa, whether we are talking about the Gaza area, whether we are talking about Libya, Sudan, we are always talking from a background deriving from the international law, because we
Yes.
respect international law as the only power capable of ruling the diversity in the world. And of course, we have some examples now that are coming from various countries of totally disregarding the international law and not giving the due respect to this law. And I could easily mention that even now we are seeing this from superpowers.
Yes.
That they disrespect the international law. We've seen, unfortunately, Russia disrespecting the international law by invading Ukraine. We've seen President Trump himself talking about that he do not think that the international law is something that has to be considered, and what he considers is only his own ethics and his own beliefs, which I think is putting all the system that it has always been based on the international law, such as the United Nations, is all now in jeopardy because of these what I consider irresponsible statements by statesmen and heads of states and superpowers, and this is actually putting the whole world at risk. We've seen this I mean, right before our eyes in the relation between Israel and the occupied territories, that Israel do not respect any sovereignty or any rights for the Palestinian people, simply because why should it, if the United States is encouraging of disrespecting the international law? The United States have mentioned clearly that it wants to acquire Greenland, for instance,
Yes.
which is not part of the United States, simply because President Trump thinks that it's important for the national security of the United States. There is no respect for Denmark. There is no respect for the international law, which actually led to a division with the European Union. I'm giving these examples just to show why is Egypt keen on respecting the unity of Somalia, because we respect the international law. And we have to mention one last thing about this, is because of this, Egypt is giving out of itself and is one of the biggest security providers all over Africa. I mean, we have
security providers. Egypt is
Yes.
participating in the African Union mission
of course,
in
through
Somalia,
the
the
United
AMISOM.
Nations. Through the United Nations,
Yes.
as you just mentioned, so AMISOM. I mean, this is the most important thing that Egypt is doing, and it's not just there. I mean, I could mention also, because I served there in Central African Republic, where there is also a contingent of the Egyptian army serving there to preserve peace and preserving the country from sliding into civil war again. So I believe that Egypt's effort in these domains are crucial, are important, are respected, and are really welcome from the international community. And all of this, as you just mentioned at the beginning, because of our respect to the international law and to the United Nations and what they represent.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador, allow me to be going to the other top story for today, from the presidential activity of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to the 9th Cairo Conference of the Presidents of the African Constitutional and the Supreme Courts, which wrapped up in the new capital on Sunday. Addressing the closing session, President of the Supreme Constitutional Court, Bulus Fahmy, said that the discussions focused on the exchange of expertise on the legal front. Fahmy said that the meeting tackled supporting the constructive dialogue among the African judges. Up to 28 countries and a number of international organizations concerned with the constitutional judiciary took part in the event. The conference aimed at strengthening the judicial and the constitutional cooperation and to support the rule of law, judicial independence, and the protection of the constitutional rights and freedoms. Mr. Ambassador, how do you see having this event here in Cairo for the 9th year running?
Well, actually, I mean, we participated several times. I mean, when I was an ambassador to Africa,
Yes.
I dispatched myself several court of the Supreme Court or the Constitutional Court according to each country and what's the highest juridical body it has. I think this is very important for several reasons. First of all, because this is actually strengthening the importance of the rule of law in the African country and how Egypt values this. The second thing is that, of course, when the African constitutional judges from all African countries meet, they definitely have many subjects to tackle together in order to, I mean, first of all, we have to understand and to explain to the public that the Constitutional Court is usually the highest court in every country in the world. This is the supreme court of all courts, the Constitutional Court. So when you receive those judges here in Egypt and when you raise their awareness about the importance of the bodies they represent, I think this is very important in fortifying the rule of law in various African countries, because this does not stop at the level of the constitutional courts. It goes all the way down. These judges, when they get back, they explain what they have seen. They explain other countries' experiences in the same field, and they could find the solution for some of their problems that another country managed to solve, and so on. And of course, it shows the rest of the world what Egypt is capable of when it can gather all the African Supreme or Constitutional Court judges to summon them in Egypt to have such a big conference on a yearly basis, and as you mentioned, for the 9th consecutive year. I think this is a very important thing. It shows what Egypt is capable of in this field, not to mention many other fields that also we are capable of. So I think it's quite important.
And within the same context, because we have seen today an exchange during a phone call between the Foreign Minister of Egypt, Dr. Badr Abdelati, and the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister of Kenya, Musalia Mudavadi. Today the phone call took place and they exchanged the points of view regarding the Nile Basin countries in general and the share of Egypt of the Nile River waters. How do you see the importance of this call that took place today?
Well, I believe that Kenya is one of the biggest countries in Africa, and the relations, the bilateral relation between Egypt and Kenya has to be always strengthened. And what I want to say here is that we should not look at this call isolated from the relation between Egypt and the various African countries. I mean,
Yes.
Just a couple of days ago there was another call with another minister, and it's something like periodic. I mean, we have to be always in contact. I mean, let me put it this way. I think the relations between Egypt and Africa since 2014 have dramatically changed from before 2014.
Yes.
And of course, we all know why, because at this date was the date that President Sisi assumed the presidency.
Yes.
And he is totally convinced with the importance of the South-South cooperation and with the integrity and the global African context. I mean, he started his reign by visiting several countries. He's continuing on doing so. He is asking the Minister of Foreign Affairs to do so. Actually, I mean, I'm not revealing a secret here. Just today I was at the meeting at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to discuss various aspects of the Egyptian-African relations,
yes.
whether we are talking about the public sector or the government or the private sector. Egypt is regaining its place in Africa, and I think it's due. I think it's a must, and I think that we are even a little bit late. We should have done this from a long time ago, as we were before in the 60s and early 70s. And I believe that this should go on, because this is our own strategic depth in the world. It's Africa.
Yes.
And it has always been Africa, and it will always remain Africa unless Egypt is planning to take its part of the continent and move elsewhere. Yes. It's impossible. So our relation with Africa has to be imperative, and not just to President Sisi, but to any president that will come in the future. He has to understand that this is something that has to be fostered on and that has to be worked on, because the idea of thinking that we are, and excuse me if I will use this term, we are the leaders in Africa, we are a strong nation, we are this does not help. What helps is really how to get closer.
Yes.
This is one of the main pillars of the relations. I mean, we have three pillars when it comes to Africa. The first one is this one, which is the mutual development.
Yes.
How can we both move forward? What is the Egyptian motto that we are always talking about, which is the win-win motto? And this is different from any other country who is coming to acquire just the richness and the resources of the African countries without giving what it's worth. Egypt is not doing that. Egypt is developing itself with the African countries so we can both advance. This is the first pillar. The second pillar is the security and the collective security of the African continent. We have always to realize how terrorism is affecting us, and how the militias and the lack of rule of law, which actually give power to these illegal militias and so on, is weakening not just each and every country, but the whole continent of Africa. And the third pillar, of course, it is the building capacity that we need to do in order to, once again, to develop the whole country altogether. So I think these are the pillars that we have always to look for, and Egypt is using geography, is using history in order to boost this, to be stronger and more powerful and more fruitful to Egypt and to the African countries.
Can we use the economy to boost this? Because during the phone call between the foreign ministers of Egypt and Kenya, investments were tackled, of course, for both ways. As you mentioned, a win-win situation. But how do you see the viability of Egypt expressing interest in having more investments into Kenya and into major African economies like Nigeria, for example, South Africa, Rwanda, all those major economies in Africa, and vice versa? What are the opportunities that we have nowadays to be exploring those horizons?
Plenty of opportunities. I mean, when you are sincere, when you are when you have this motto I just talked about, the win-win, and you are not just there to between brackets to steal the resources of Africa, then you have a very good opportunity. I have recently joined the private sector.
Yes.
And I can tell you that wherever I go in Africa, and I visited a dozen countries, maybe more, in Africa, we are always looked at in a good way, because they know that the Egyptians, when they are coming, they are not coming to steal them. On the contrary, they are coming to help. We have donated even things that does not, I mean, that there is no even profit for us.
Yes.
But because we believe that we have to help each other in order to move forward. And this is what I want to say. There are plenty of opportunities, whether we are talking about agriculture, we are talking about industry, we are talking about pharmaceutical and medical. If we are talking about mining, of course, this is one of the major attraction in Africa, the mining and how we can help to excavate all the richness of the African countries for the African countries, how they can profit from. I will give you just an example. I mean, there was a certain mineral that one ex-colonial country was buying from a certain African country with $20, I believe, the kilograms, while the value was above $1,000. So you could imagine what is the difference of the market that they were forcing the African to sell with and the real price in the market. And this is what pushes the African to actually force the African to push back the ex-colonial powers. Just, I think, yesterday or the day before, there was an accusation made by Russia to France that they have to take their grip of Africa because the Africans are suffering because of this. I'm not discussing whether it's true or false, but I'm just talking about that there are powers who are looking into Africa, whether the Russian, the French, the British, the Germans, the Americans, they're all there. The Chinese even are there. They want to see opportunities. So Egypt is no less than this country. They can find the good opportunities, but we have better ethics, I believe. The Egyptians, we have better ethics. That's why we are not just there to profit, but for mutual profit for both sides.
On the other hand, how do you think, Mr. Ambassador, strengthening the bilateral relations between Egypt and Africa is fitting within the broader foreign policy agenda and vision of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Foreign Minister Dr. Badr Abdulati now?
I just mentioned a few minutes ago that what we are looking for is mutual benefit.
Yes.
And we believe that Egypt alone cannot develop without Africa. And Africa also cannot develop without external powers.
Yes.
And we want to be this external body that can help the African to benefit from their own resources. And this is what I'm talking about here, is that we can both gain. We can both build a good interest for the good for the people, and for the good of sustainability, and for the good of environment. We can all help this. I mean, I think we have the expertise all over Africa that can actually do this and accomplish and give fruits and results. But we have to cooperate. And this is what we are doing now. I believe that the private sector, even in Egypt now, is more involved more than ever into Africa. As I just told you, I am now with the private sector, and I can tell you that not just our company, but many companies are seeking how can we benefit from this emerging market, because it's a strong emerging market, which is the African market. And I believe that we can do this. And what the state is doing, what the government is doing, what, as you mentioned, whether we're talking about His Excellency the President himself, or even the Minister of Foreign Affairs, or any other minister, is to pave the way for the private sector. And now it's the turn for the private sector to enter, to start, to work, and to mutually develop the African countries for the benefit of the African countries.
What are the benefits that could be returning for Egypt and the rest of Africa if we focus, as we are nowadays, on the significance of the bilateral relations between Egypt and East Africa and West Africa?
All right. I mean, if we are talking about East Africa, I mean, there are several points that we have to observe. First of all, the security of the Horn of Africa, the stability of this region, securing the maritime routes in this area, securing the Red Sea, and securing the needs of water for the countries that are in this area. So this is a very crucial point. When we are looking at the West, we have also several aspects that are very important. First, there is abundance of raw materials and minerals and resources in these countries.
Yes.
Second, they have, fair influence in the political arena, especially in the African domain. And not to forget, of course, that with these countries we haven't actually pursued what we need to do in these countries. We have always been focused on the east of Africa and the Nile Basin countries.
Yes.
And we did not give enough attention to the West, as you just asked. Just the mere asking of the question shows that. What about the West?
Yes.
The East we know, we heard, just today, as you just mentioned, the president of Somalia was in Egypt, and this is not the first visit, and it won't be the last. And we have seen also other visits to Somalia recently. But in the West, it's less frequent. So although the West have many resources. So I believe that Central and West Africa needs more attention from us, and I believe that we are starting to build that, and we are visiting these countries. We are seeking how we can develop relations to be on a higher level than it usually was. And I think that each country, and this will lead us to one last thing that I want to say, that there is a specificity of every region in Africa.
Yes.
There is this wrong or understanding, lack of understanding in the minds of maybe many Egyptians that Sub-Saharan Africa is one block. No, it isn't.
Sure.
West and is different than the East, different than the Central, different than the South, and we have to understand how are those people thinking. We have to get more integrated into Africa on personal level. We have to see more of their culture. We have to see more of their resources. We have to study more as individuals, as private sector. We have to learn more in order to be able to achieve more integration within our African environment. And I believe this is a very important thing, so we can, as we said from the beginning, mutually develop our countries.
Yes, Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate.
Thank you always for having me.
Anytime. And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi welcomes at Cairo International Airport His Majesty King Abdullah II, monarch of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. President el-Sisi then accompanied His Majesty to Al Ittihadiyya Palace to conduct bilateral discussions. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and First Lady Mrs. Intisar el-Sisi welcome at Cairo International Airport His Excellency President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of the Republic of Turkey, and the First Lady Mrs. Amina Erdogan. President el-Sisi then accompanied both the guests to the Ittihadiyya Palace, where a red carpet reception was held, followed by the discussions by the two leaders. A bilateral meeting was held between President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Turkish President Erdogan, followed by the chairing of both leaders of the second meeting of the High-Level Strategic Cooperation Council between Egypt and Turkey. The meeting tackled the progress of bilateral ties and ways of boosting them in all domains, especially trade and investment. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan both signed the joint statement of the second meeting of the High-Level Strategic Cooperation Council. Moreover, a number of agreements and memorandums of understanding were signed between the two countries. In addition, a joint press conference was held between both leaders. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan both participate in the final session of the Egyptian-Turkish Forum held in Cairo within the framework of the Turkish President's visit to Egypt. President Erdogan of Turkey offers President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi an electric car as a present on the occasion of his visit to Egypt to take part in the second meeting of the High-Level Strategic Cooperation Council held in Cairo.